next presenters are Ann Vrbka, and she's Program Director of the Lincoln Treatment Center. And she oversees the daily operations of outpatient medication assisted treatment program at the treatment center, and has been working specifically with opioid addiction since 2008. And Jim Jim Weiss, my mistake, has been associated with methadone treatment since 1979. He's a director of quality management at Riverwood Group, which is a methadone treatment program that's run in multiple states. And they are going to talk about the importance of early identification of use and recognizing the signs and symptoms and progression of addiction. And they also have given us some handouts, 3 different handouts that we put on the back table over there that have like different treatment and medication options for kids with opioid addiction. So please welcome Jim and Ann.
A little bit about Riverwood Group, just to give you guys some familiarity. Riverwood Group owns 10 methadone maintenance clinics. We are in 9 different states. These programs are required to be licensed by the individual states. We have to have Board of Pharmacy license in several states. We have to have DEA registrations in every state. Methadone programs are very highly regulated. In fact, it's one of the most highly regulated substance abuse programs in the world. Methadone maintenance is present throughout the world except for in a few of the Arabic countries. Russia is really starting to get into methadone maintenance itself, and they've got their own organizations in Europe. South America is really big into it. Australians, of course, they're big into methadone maintenance and everything else. But Riverwood Group has been present in Lincoln and Omaha since 2007. Wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of background about where I'm coming from with opioids and why I'm doing the type of work that I'm doing, and then get into some of the history about all of this opioid pain medication. But as a probation officer back in the late 70s and early 80s, all of my heroin addicts, I referred to what was called the Gaylord Street Project. That was part of the University of Colorado Medical Center. They had a methadone program in its early infancy. And of course, I got in trouble for doing that because I wasn't following the orders of the court. And after giving a presentation to the Chief Justice showing that my heroin addicts that were involved in methadone maintenance and opioid treatment were paying restitution, they weren't out ripping and roaring, they were getting back with their family and working, Judge Lichtenstein told my boss to leave me alone and let me do my job the way I wanted to do it. Then as a rehabilitation counselor, I dealt with a lot of people who were on workers' comp or disability of some type, and you had the insurance company doctor, the attorney's doctor, the other insurance company's doctor, trying to treat this poor person with narcotic pain medications, making him sick as a dog because there's an opiate agonist and an opiate antagonist. You put the 2 together, you make the person sick. They're always sick. They can't go back to work. It increases the cycle. The lawyers love it. The insurance companies hate it. Got a few people through the workers' compensation courts in a couple of states onto methadone programs, and lo and behold, within 6 months, they were feeling fine and going back to work. So I've seen it work firsthand. I've seen people come in where you swear they're about ready to die during the intake, and inside of a couple of weeks, once they get stabilized on this medication and stop doing all the other stuff, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So I believe in it. I know it's a controversial treatment. It has a lot of a social stigma around it. We're not going to talk about the social stigma today. We're just going to talk about what is opioids. But I believe you have a packet that has my contact information. Feel free to email me, give me a telephone call, and I'll be more than happy to send you whatever I can to provide you some more education about what is the treatment aspect of it. But I wanted to get into the history of opioid use. Archaeologists tell us that ancient people were always striving to find some way to take care of their pain. Witchcraft type activities, medicine man type activities, I meant to say, or performing treatments to chase evil spirits away from the body. There's so many different theories about how to get it out of your system. Some of you also probably heard in your past about people who would receive bloodletting treatments to get whatever they're ailing out of their system. That was just another way of trying to also, people who had pain, well, the pain was something in there, let's get the blood out of your system and you'll be fine. It really didn't work. Back in the ancient Egypt, they were able to find some records that show that their warriors and people who were having pain would be treated by putting electric eels on whatever the source of pain was that they had. And, you know, that's something that is still kind of going on today. Those of you who are in the medical field know what the TENS machine is, the transcutaneous nerve stimulator. That's where you're making pain to block pain. Well, that's what the electric eel was. They generated a little bit of pain to block the pain that the person was having. So the world has been really dealing with it for a long time. Even ancient Greeks, women who were going through childbirth would be asked to chew on some willow leaves. Willow leaves have a basic acid in it that is the same substance that we find in today's aspirin. So that kind of helps take care of the pain and everything else. So it's been around a long time. Middle Ages, of course, changed the slide. That you still used a lot of herbs and a concoction of honey and alcohol with about 64 different other types of herbs that were going on. And what's going on now is interesting. Herbal treatment for opioid addiction is starting to come back, and that's something that in the schools you might want to be paying attention to. We've got the synthetic marijuana that's out there. And we got the cannabinoid oil that they can put in their e-cigs and smoke the cannabinoid oil without having to use the synthetics. Ancient times, there was a leaf. It was from a tree in Taiwan. It's called Kartob, K-A-R-T-O-B. And it's a growing industry out there. If you see your kids running around chewing on leafy substances, the leaf, although it is an herbal substance, it's not regulated by the DEA, it's not regulated by the boards of pharmacy. Only one state has tried to regulate it, and that's been Indiana, and they made it illegal to possess it. It's coming up from the south big time. We have a lot of it in our Arkansas and our Kansas clinics already. It's a leaf where the kids can chew on it, and they get that euphoric feeling that comes with abuse of opioids. But they say, it's not a pain pill, it's okay for me to do it. The problem with those leaves is they create dependence, they create tolerance, they create addiction. We've dealt with adults who are sometimes going through $15,000, $20,000 a year buying those leaves from their herbal remedy shops. So again, the treatment that we used to see in the Middle Ages with herbs, it's kind of coming back. The key to the current types of opioids is the opium that comes from the opium plants. You see them a lot in Afghanistan, you also see them a lot in foreign countries. And the component in there is that's extracted out is the morphine. Morphine is what you see a lot of in the hospitals for medicinal use. In the 1830s, in France, they started to get into some of the more synthetic morphines for pain treatment. During the Second World War, the United States cut off the supply of morphine to Germany. The Germans did some experimenting and they came up with a medication called Dolafin. And that medication has been since enhanced more to be methadone. A lot of people think that Hitler is responsible for developing methadone. Well, no, that's not true. It was just the pain medication that his scientists came up with because they had to do something for their soldiers who were badly wounded during war. In the 20th century, late 20th century, we started to see a whole new bunch of pharmaceutical pain pills hitting the market. They were synthetic, man-made for the most part. You didn't see a whole lot of the heroin that was so popular in the 60s and 70s, especially with our returning Vietnam veterans. People were finding it easier to use the pain pills. The pain pills were giving them better euphoric feelings. Unlike the heroin, which every 3 to 4 hours they had to go out and inject to feel okay, with the new synthetic pain medications, they were finding that they were able to last longer, maybe 6 hours, maybe 8 hours. And then, being the recreational drug users that a lot of them were, they found that if they crush those things down and get those little time release capsules that are inside of the pill to break up, it can lead to a more intense euphoric rush. So people also started cooking them down and injecting pain pills. You could actually do that at one point in time. There's still a lot of pain pills that you can still inject. The most popular pain pill was Oxycontin. That was reformulated to a gel cap, which makes it more difficult for them to cook down and inject. With the growing problems with all the pain pills, it was in the media. There used to be pain pills are class 2 narcotic substance. There was a class 3 narcotic substance, hydrocodones. With a class 2 narcotic substance, you cannot get a refill. You have to go to your doctor has to write you a prescription, then you can go to the pharmacist and you finish up that prescription, you have to go back and get a prescription. With the class 3s, you could get a 90-day supply. You can no longer do that now. Hydrocodone's been reclassified as a class 2 narcotic substance, no refills. So those of you who are nurses working in a school and you have your student come in and they've got this refill prescription, know to question it, okay? This law that the DEA passed has been in effect for several months. So if you have a person present you with a current pain pill prescription that has a refill, question what's going on. Question, is that person really seeing a real doctor making their own labels? Because we've seen people make their own pharmacy labels to get stuff off the streets, okay? There's a lot of different types of pain pills. The most common that you're going to see in the schools, the most common that you're going to see on the streets, are the hydrocodone and the oxycodone. And the hydrocodone, as you can see, it goes by different names: Vicodin, Lortab, Lorcets, oxycodones, Percodans, Percocets. We all know the Percodans and Percocets from the early 80s. You know, that was the favorite pill for the generic crowd to help them with their knee pains. Give them a few Percodans, a few Percocets, or a few Darvons. You would see that too. But anyway, it just goes down. That word, morphine, codeine, fentanyl. Fentanyl is something that in the school districts and also with the young adults you really have to look out for. Fentanyl is basically a patch. They can put that patch on, they can hide it under their shirt, under their pants, anywhere on their body that they want to, and that patch is going to keep pumping them full of a very strong narcotic for several hours. People have also been known to take the fentanyl patches, Duragesic is the other name for it, and they'll chew on them. They will put them in a cup of hot water and steep it so they can have some tea. Lots of different ways to get that stuff going, and it's one that in the adult world we don't see a whole lot of. We see it, but it's our understanding that it is more common in the school-aged people and the early 20s people.
And it doesn't always show up in drug tests either, because it's chemically far enough away from morphine. So a lot of your standard drug tests won't show it up as opiates.
Okay.
They would have to test specifically for it.
To kind of show you how it's grown, in about 1991, there was 760 million prescriptions for opioid medications in the United States. Oxycodone and hydrocodone counted for about half of those prescriptions. They're the most popular medications. Again, in 1996, there was 940 million opioid prescriptions. Again, the majority was hydrocodone at that time. In 2000, there was 126 million opioid prescriptions. Really started to see a significant increase in the oxycodone. And the reason for that is that's when the oxycodone was also put into the timed released formula, a lot stronger, a lot bigger kick for people. Hydrocodone was still about 2/3 of the prescriptions, but oxycodone was about 1/4 of all the prescriptions in the United States in 2000. 2010, we got 210 million opioids. Hydrocodone was still the most frequently prescribed because it's a Schedule III. You don't have to go back and see the doctor every month. Now you do. And then in 2013, 207 million opioid prescriptions. 124 million of them are hydrocodone, and 53 million of them are oxycodone. There's no current data for 2014 and 2015, but as I was telling you, 2014 is where they changed the classification of the hydrocodone. So it's going to be interesting to see how hydrocodone is probably going to fall way down on the list, but oxycodone is still going to be up there. Even though the oxycodone was reformulated to a gel cap, it is still a very popular thing. And the hardcore injecting drug people are still injecting, even if it's got the gel. And as a result, you're starting to see a lot of skin necrosis. That's where the skin's dying, or muscle popping, where the tissue is just degrading itself. For school-aged people and young adults, 370,000 opioid deaths between the ages of 15 and 24 in 2011. 370,000 kids and young adults just because they're using pain meds. The ages of 25 to 34, 710,000 opioid pain deaths. Our clinics, we do see people who die from opioid use, not necessarily the methadone. They might be on the methadone programs. They're just getting started. The first 2 weeks of getting them started on the program is the most difficult and the most critical. That's where, by federal laws, we have to start them at a low dose and taper them up to make sure that we don't shoot over their threshold. But being an addict, they want that fix. They're not feeling good. They go out and they do their pain medications or they do other medications, and they die from a drug overdose, but it's almost always blamed on the methadone that's in their system because of the social stigmas of it. But do know that the majority of people who do die from an opioid-related death, both the teenagers, the young adults, and the adults, the vast majority of times there's high concentrations of yet other medications. Benzodiazepines is one of the most critical ones that they see. We'll get into that a bit later. People who are taking pain medications as prescribed, or people who are abusing pain medications but have learned where their tolerance level is, the risk of an opioid death for them is a lot less. The big majority of the opioid deaths are those who are just getting into it, learning about it, or then suicides are also attributed to a lot of opioid overdose situations. In 2013, you can see that the majority of people are still starting to use marijuana as their gateway drug, okay? But you can see that the pain relievers are a real close second. I was just at a national conference over the weekend in the past 2 days in Atlanta with the American Association of the Treatment of Opioid Dependency. The Centers for Disease Control have some new records that they're going to be releasing. The CDC is actually calling pain medications a bigger gateway problem than methadone right now. And the reason they're saying that is because so many states are showing tolerance for possession of marijuana, but they're not showing the tolerance for the opioids still. So the CDC is saying the biggest gateway drug right now is the pain relievers. You'll also see that it's followed by other psychoactive drugs, tranquilizers, stimulants. Stimulants is including the methamphetamine. Here in Nebraska, you would expect to see a bigger spike in methamphetamine. Well, this is national data. It's not regional. Methamphetamine's not really that big on either of the coasts. It's still really a big Midwest drug right now. Okay? In a study that was done by the University of Michigan where they were monitoring the future, they looked at what has been the top drugs among 8th and 12th graders during the past year. This was 2014. You can still see that marijuana is up there along with the hashish, but you can see how in the 12th grade, the medications are starting to make a bigger play. The Adderall. The biggest, Adderall is the biggest ADHD medication you see. You still see a lot of the Ritalin. There's another ADHD medication out there called Strattera. Strattera really doesn't present a lot of dependency issues. It's not a real popular drug, okay? But then you also see we're starting to come in with the Vicodin and the tranquilizers and the cough medicine and the sedatives. 3% of them are starting to use their Oxycontin in the 12th grade, okay? That's a lot of kids. And that was just in the state of Michigan. You can only imagine what it is for Nebraska. Nebraska really doesn't have any data that's been released about that. So where do these kids get their pain medication? That's a big question, okay? This slide really shows you that the majority of people, they get their pain medication from their family, their friends, their relatives, 53% of them. And what is really shocking is you look at the smaller circle. Of that 53% of them, this is medication that's being prescribed to someone by a doctor. It's not being taken, or mom and dad are kind of medicating their kids because they got a few extra pain pills or something like that, or the kids are just grabbing it. So the majority of the problem with the kids is the legal medication that's coming from a prescription. It's not coming from your street dealers. It's coming from a doctor and a family member.
It's like 90% combined between friend, family, and doctor.
Yes, 90% combined between everybody. So the younger kids really aren't going to the streets for their drugs. You hear people talk about our football teams and how there's some sharing of pain meds after a game or before a game. That's happening, but it's stuff that's being snuck in from mom and dad's medicine closet. What's really interesting when you look at the probation side of things, where they're doing juvenile probation and they're dealing with a kid who has a pain pill problem, they will admit, and they have admitted, that they will go to a friend's party, they will excuse themselves from the party to go to the bathroom, and they'll look for mom and dad's medication in the bathroom, or they'll look for mom and dad's medication in mom and dad's bedroom, or in the kitchen cupboards where they usually keep the glasses. Those are the most common places where people keep their pain meds, and that's where our kids are going to find these pain medications in your home. So, as parents, I can't encourage you enough to keep count of your pain meds and know where they're at, because the kids are going after them. There is a decent resale market for the pain meds on the streets as well. But as we were saying earlier, the majority of the pain meds for our kids and our young adults, and even our adults, are coming from legal prescriptions. Doctors themselves, Bill Moyers from CBS News did a study about 2 years ago. He toured a bunch of medical colleges, spoke to the doctors. What's your training in addiction medicine? I had a class. I learned about it during my residency. I saw it in the emergency room. That's about it. Doctors really are not trained on what is this opioid dependency problem. They know that the pain pills are very highly addictive. They know that there's a lot of drug seeking that goes on in the emergency rooms. The doctors in the private clinics, they are more oriented to help you feel better, not address an addiction that they might be suspecting. Let somebody else deal with that. I'll just give you the prescription. So there's a big push nationwide by the American Society of Addiction Medicine to get into these colleges and train these doctors on what is this pain med, and train them on the neurobiology of addiction to opioid medications. It's starting to make a little bit of an impact in some of the bigger states where they have massive medical centers. You're starting to see more and more doctors cutting their people off and referring them to treatment programs. Nebraska's not blessed with that mindset yet, even though we got 2 medical colleges in Omaha. We still have a lot of the doctors that are still prescribing a lot of medications. Or we have one healthcare system that once you present to the emergency room in pain, you're automatically classified as a drug-seeking individual until the objective science proves otherwise. For example, I went in there one day. I was a real bad hurting unit. I was experiencing my first kidney stone, so guys, you know what that's all about. They let me lay there in pain for hours until they decided and took the x-ray and saw, yeah, there's those funny little rocks in my kidney. Then they gave me treatment. People who are on methadone maintenance programs will go to an emergency room. They will disclose to their doctor on methadone. The doctor will not give them any pain medication because the assumption is your methadone is an opiate. Opioids treat pain, therefore you don't need anything. And where the doctors are losing out on this is our kids start young, they start using pain medication, and they start pushing their opioid tolerance up and up and up. Okay? And once you push an opioid tolerance up, it's there for life, thanks to that little guy in the back of your brain called the amygdala, because it's going to remember everything once you reintroduce something to it. If you're on a methadone maintenance, your methadone is there to match your tolerance. It's not there to get you high. It's not there to impair you. It's there to match the tolerance so you can work on some physical healing issues that we'll talk about here in a few moments on the brain. But doctors will say, oh, you're on opioids, and you might need a pain pill because right now you're really hurting, and your pain tolerance need is higher than what it normally is, but the doctor's not going to treat it. So you see a lot of people in ERs having that problem. We see a lot of pregnant women who will go in to give birth where the doctors will not give them a pain medication to help them with the childbirthing process because they're on methadone. Anyway, the big thing, it's not just a pain pill problem anymore. As you probably have seen in your schools and everything else, heroin is really coming back big time. Heroin, back in the 60s and the 70s, it was 15, 20, 25% pure. The average heroin today is 80% plus pure. Smaller amounts, bigger rush, higher deaths from the heroin that's coming on right now. Kids like heroin. A pain pill might cost you upwards of $80. A hit of heroin costs you $8 to $10. And the story is still true. About in the 60s and 70s, they said 1 or 2 hits on heroin and you're addicted for life. It's the same thing now. The kids, they're getting this really pure heroin. They're getting real strong heroin. A lot of kids are saying they've been addicted after their first injection of heroin. So we really do in the world have to watch out for the kids that are doing the heroin too. I do know that a lot of people will inject methamphetamine. They're also all injecting the heroin. So in the schools and the probation systems and the substance abuse programs, we need to reorient our people to look for tracks. And tracks aren't always going to be here on your arm anymore. Kids have found some very interesting places to inject.
Between the toes.
Between the toes, in the crotch area. Women, there's been proof that people have injected into the breasts, in the armpits. There's a real nice vein that runs down back here that they can inject into. So they can hide what they're doing more so than what they used to. But that's where you also need to start paying attention to maybe a lot of the physical indicators of opiate addiction that we'll get into here in a little bit. But recent CDC data, 1 people in 15, okay, For every 15 people that are using pain pills, at least one of them is using heroin. People take non-medical prescription pain relievers will try heroin within the first 10 years of their starting to use illicit medications. Okay, it's just amazing. Emergency room visits that are secondary to heroin overdoses is just really skyrocketing. Okay. Looking into our school-age kids, age 12 and up, in 2013, the CDC reports that 517,000 kids were injecting heroin. Okay. In 2009, it was only 361,000 kids were injecting heroin. 2002 to 2008, about 180,000 kids were injecting heroin. So you can see heroin's really coming back in the past several years, and kids are really starting to like it. Heroin use, it tells the story right there, how heroin has been growing over the years. We had a spike in 2006, then it went down, and now it's coming back up there, big times. Ages 12 and up for heroin use. Heroin deaths, I'm colorblind, but the line that says 18 to 24, that's the group we're most interested in. We can see that starting at about 2008, a lot more heroin deaths, but you can just see how the cycle is going up. The recent data that the CDC was talking about on Sunday is that spike has continued. It has not gone downhill at all for heroin deaths, for adults or for kids. Mostly guys. Okay, so pay attention to your guys. That's the biggest problem with the heroin right now. Okay. And drug poisoning deaths, again, we can see. With the opioid analgesics, that's the pain pills. We still have more deaths of kids, 1999 to 2011, because of the pain pills, more so than the heroin or even the cocaine. Okay, so let's talk about recognizing the signs of opiate use. How many of you in here are substance abuse trained counselors? Okay, we got a few of you. There's a laundry list of signs and symptoms of opioid or of addiction. Social things, behavioral changes, physical changes, things like that. Opioid use is a real easy addiction to hide when you get it going, because a lot of people, well, let's talk about drowsiness. Oh, little Johnny spent too much time out partying and they're up all night and they're just catnapping, or well, they started working and they're working late evenings at the restaurant and they're having to get up early, so they're kind of drowsy in the morning. Drowsiness is a major indication of someone who is on pain medications. Opioids are what is called a central nervous system depressant. A central nervous system depressant slows down your respiration, your breathing shallower. As a result, it slows down your pulse rate because your heart's not getting properly oxygenated. Without the heart getting properly oxygenated, it's not sending the blood to the brain, so the brain's kind of shutting down. Drowsiness. With the opiate addiction, the drowsiness, during the peak effect of people being under the influence, you know, we've all been tired. We've all been wanting to go to sleep after lunch at seminars and things like that. And we kind of nod our heads and stuff like that. But you don't have the eyeballs that are showing signs of addiction. You're not seeing the loss of muscle control around the mouth where you're drooling. You're easier to arouse. I mean, I remember in grad school, I'd sit there with a pencil in my hand like that. Oh, the pencil fell down. I'd wake up. Your person on the pain pill, if they tried that little pencil exercise, they wouldn't wake up from it. They would still continue to be real drowsy and lethargic. So be mindful of that, especially if you're in a school setting and you see the kid that's a little bit more drowsy than what they might need to be. Okay. Inability to concentrate. That's a big addiction sign in all classes, even with opioid addictions. As we're talking, you got the central nervous system depressant, the lack of oxygenation to the brain. So the brain's just kind of sitting there coasting, and then it's trying to keep itself going by going in different directions that aren't requiring as many cognitive faculties as listening to something might be. So they're having trouble concentrating, okay? So the motivation is a big sign of opiate use. Physical changes in your appearance is a big one. As I said earlier, it can sometimes be hard to see when someone's abusing the opioids. But look at them. If they're looking tired, look at their eyeballs. If they got those real pinpoint pupils, you might have someone that's under the influence. Itching of the arms and hands. Now that's itching, unlike methamphetamine where they're picking at things. These are people that are just itching. They say, oh, I got dry skin and I'm itchy and itchy and itchy. Real big difference to look for there and know about. It's not methamphetamine. The itching might be there. And the itching takes place anywhere on the body, just like the methamphetamine itching, okay? If we have a person who is using opioids and they haven't used opioids for the past 4 to 6 hours and they have an opioid dependency in the schools, you're going to see them in the afternoons probably yawning more, starting to fall asleep, having goose pimples where there really is no reason for them to have goose pimples. It's called, oh, nurses help me, piloerection or something like that. Those are things that you can see. Frequently needing to go to the bathroom because they're having diarrhea, okay? Those are withdrawal symptoms from an opioid medication. Withdrawal symptoms from a lot of other medications as well. But when you kind of combine the lethargic, the lack of concentration, the drowsiness, the itching, the runny nose, all that kind of stuff, that says you might have a person that's using opioids instead of other stimulant type drugs.
Maybe sweating or...
Heavy sweating is another one, except for me, I'm a fat guy in a hot room, so. We all know that, is that a hand up?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
How long, like, I'm trying to think of an individual, because you can see some of these symptoms for a lot of other different reasons with kids. So how often would a person have to abuse this drug to start seeing some of these symptoms? Is it after they've maybe used it, you know?
Okay. A lot of that can depend on the type of drug. Some opioids, heroin for a good example, but some of the other pain pills, they say take one every 4 hours, okay? Oxycontin, hydrocodones, they're good for 8 hours. So if you take a bunch of them, you might be good for 6 hours before you really start to feel uncomfortable.
Or did you mean how long have they been using
Right.
total before they would maybe get to the
Oh,
point?
okay. I see. When they've reached their tolerance level. That's an individual thing. We'll get into that a little bit more about, you know, why do people become addicted to opioids? You have some people, the kids with the new pure heroin, they say, I'm addicted from day one. You get the kids that are going to the parties using the pain pills, they say, oh, after my 3rd or 4th time, I just love that stuff and I couldn't stop using it. Don't know. And then again, it's also the drug that they're using, how much they're using,
How they're using
and how they're using it. Injectors tend to get a physical dependency more so than the ones who snort it or drink it down orally. Okay. Behavioral changes. We all see the behavioral changes in all the substance abuse. It's not really that much different with the opioid users. But what is really different is we tend to look at the social changes of a methamphetamine or cocaine person, kind of hanging around the crowd that we are socialized to identify as maybe a cocaine user or a methamphetamine user. You know, they're kind of disheveled, more of the rough-looking type of kid and stuff like that. Your opioid kids can be hanging around with the class president, with the academic kids, because those groups are also using the opioids, and that's where they can get that from their friends. So the changes in social behaviors, the peer groups aren't really as obvious with the opioid-dependent person as they are. But there is still a lot of social withdrawal, social inhibition, and then some of them, if they're really becoming dependent on the opioids, they do begin to get into some of the more aggressive behaviors. And that aggressive behavior is not the psychological craziness that comes with the stimulants. That's the aggressive behavior because I don't want to be sick, I've got to take a pain pill. Okay. Those are the basic signs and symptoms for recognizing opiate use. A lot of similarity with general narcotics. Okay. But more subtle. It really takes someone to look and see and know more about the opioid side of things. Okay. There's two reasons that people become really dependent on opioids when you boil it down. Dopamine and endorphins. Those are the natural chemicals that are in your brain. Your body essentially is wired to have basically its own pain-relieving systems. That's the dopamine. Okay. Or it's wired to have your own things that keep you excited and make you feel good. That's the endorphins. Okay. What happens at birth? A normal person might have a full supply of endorphins and dopamine, and that's fine. And then if they get hurt, they might need a period of pain medication. The pain medication is not used at the extent to disrupt the body's own production and maintenance of dopamine and endorphins. But when the kids or the young adults start using more pain medications than what they should, or using heroin, what happens is the brain senses that there's these opioid systems that are going up into their brain, and they attach, and I'm not going to get into a neurobiology thing, but it's called a mu receptor site in your brain, and that's where a lot of the dopamines and the endorphins hang out, and the pain pills are a very close molecular structure to those substances. The brain realizes that it's got a overproduction of those, so the brain stops producing its own natural endorphins and dopamine. That's what starts driving an addiction and a person needing to use more and more and more, because the brain is saying, oh, I'm short on this chemical. I need something, and the brain can't produce it, but the pain pills or the heroin can produce it. There's a thing that a lot of people have said about opioid dependency. Get them onto a methadone, all you're doing is filling the holes in their head. Well, the holes in their head are the absence of the dopamine and endorphins. Okay. Y'all know what a PET image is? PET scan image? It's a color image of the brain. And they have taken an opioid-dependent person's brain and whatever they classified as a normal brain at the time, and they look at the color imaging, and you can see on the opioid-dependent person's brain all the damage and the slow processes that are going on. Now, it takes a good 24-month average, anywhere from 18 to 26 months, for the brain to physiologically heal from the opioids to where it's kind of like the normal brain. And to give you more of an example, y'all probably have seen or heard about people who have stroke, and the first 90 days after they have their stroke is the most critical to see what they recover. That's the same thing with the brain, but it's a lot slower. 18 to 26 months, on the average 24 months, for the brain to really start to heal from the onslaught of the opioids, for the dopamine, for the endorphins to kind of get back to normal. They never really do, but they kind of get back. We also have this situation where we have kids who are born almost predetermined to have some type of an opioid problem because their brains just really didn't develop to the point where they naturally produce the right amounts of dopamine and endorphins. So there is both a nature and nurture kind of thing. And then it's just with the opioid brain, people who really become dependent on opioids, if they don't go through proper treatment, long-term treatment, get the brain healed, and then start working with all the psychosocial sides of the addiction, there's a 90% chance that within 5 years they're going to relapse. With our kids, the big thing is get them in there, get them into an inpatient program, get them detoxed, and get them out 30 days later. If they've really started getting into the opioid addiction, very high probability, 90% that before the end of a year, they're going to be back on their pain pills or back on their heroin. To get into our program, we have to look at a person, have they been through 2 prior detoxes as an adolescent to get into a program like ours as an adolescent? Because they've already shown that they just don't have what it takes to hold it on their own. Okay. The medical research from the American Society of Addiction Medicine says that about 10% of the United States population is prone to opioid addiction. 10% of us. So in this room, I don't know what, let's say if there's 100 of us, 10 of us either are on opioids or enjoy the feeling of opioids if we've ever used them, or have a very high probability that we might go that route sometime in our life, okay? It's just a reality of things. Benzodiazepines. When we're talking about opioid dependency in our kids and our young adults, there's 2 other medications that you really have to talk about and be aware of. Benzodiazepines is one. Benzodiazepines, they're another central nervous system depressant. They slow down the respiration, they slow down the heartbeat. You can die from a benzodiazepine overdose. You can also die from not having benzodiazepines in your body if you're dependent on benzodiazepines. A lot of doctors prescribe benzos to help the patient calm down, be less anxious in social settings, feel less stressed out with their test anxiety and things like that. Opioid-dependent people love their benzodiazepines. 30% of the people who are on opioids also abuse benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines, the primary source again is the doctor or the mom and pop medicine cabinet shopping, not so much on the streets at the age that we're dealing with here. Benzodiazepines and opioids combined together create what's called a synergistic effect of medications. And the best way to describe that is if your opioid is worth 10 points and your benzodiazepine is worth 10 points and you take them together, it's worth about 50 points because they just accentuate on each other. Faster suppression of the nervous system, faster combined death. With people who are on opioids, at the right level, it's not the opioid that impairs them, it's the benzodiazepine and the synergistic effect. Okay? So it's really important if you do have a kid that's using pain pills or even a peer, are they on this benzodiazepine medication? And if so, the 2 can be safely used together in a medical program, but it's important that the doctor prescribing the opiates also knows about the doctor prescribing the benzos and the synergistic effect. I gave you some of the street names that are out there too. Barbs, I don't know why. When I was a kid, barbs were barbiturates. Barbiturates really aren't that big anymore, but the kids are calling the benzos barbs. Okay, don't know. They say everything comes around every 20 years, right? Phennies. Phennies is a strange name. Phenazepam. It is a very infrequently used veterinary quality benzodiazepine. But the kids like it. Especially here in Nebraska, our rural farm kids. Got to calm the horses down, got to calm the cows down to transport them somewhere or do something like that. That's a veterinary medication thing there. In the world of substance abuse, there's really only 2 types of medications that will kill you if you withdraw from them abruptly: alcohol and benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines have been documented 6 months after stopping use to cause seizures that result in death. So when you do have a person who's on a benzodiazepine medication, it really isn't medically indicated to say, you got to stop using that medication now or you're going to be kicked out of this, you're going to be kicked out of that. It's important to taper them down and work with the doctor to taper them down on that benzodiazepine so that you minimize the risk of the seizures and then the subsequent death. So alcohol and benzos are the only 2 drugs that abrupt stopping will result in a fatality. Benzodiazepines, unfortunately, are classified as a Schedule 4 narcotic. Very low abuse potential. There's 5 classes of narcotics. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 is basically your over-the-counter stuff, okay? Another medication that we have to be attentive to, especially in the school-age kids, is the cough syrups. Cough syrups, there are some that contain codeine. It's not available over the counter, but how many people have gotten their narcotic cough medicine from the doctor? They drank about half of it like they're supposed to, and they put the other half away because they're no longer having the coughing and stuff like that. And little Jimmy goes to mommy's bathroom cupboards, and there it is, and they drink it. It's interesting, you'll see. Right here. Cough syrups that contain codeine are classified as a Schedule 5 narcotic. Real low addiction potential. In our programs, if we have a person that comes to us and say, I've been using cough syrup for 3 years, we have to ask ourselves, how do we get them on the program? Because it's not really a Schedule 2 narcotic, which is what we're supposed to focus on, but it is an addictive narcotic. It creates tolerance and dependence. So that's where our doctor has to be real smart and be able to write something that's longer than his arm to justify why they're being admitted into the program. But cough syrup in the schools, you're always going to see your kids. They've got a bottle of pharmaceutical cough syrup in their what is it? Lockers. It's been a long time. So be attentive to that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Ann. Ann is licensed in the state of Nebraska as a substance abuse counselor. I am no longer licensed because I don't see patients. I haven't seen patients or done patient care for a long time. I'm the idiot that sits in the back and makes up policy. But I'm going to let Ann talk to you about addiction and youth prevention, what you can do in the schools to try to address it more on that level.
Change that. Wrong way. Okay. Substance abuse used by adolescents can also be prevented through interventions involving risk and protective factors. And the longer you postpone somebody's first use of alcohol or other drugs, the less likely they are to develop an addiction. These variables operate at different stages of development and reflect areas of influence, including individual, which would be like the biological, psychological dispositions, attitudes, values, knowledge, skills, and problem behaviors of the individual. Family, so like the function, management, and bonding of the family. Peer would be norms and activities. School bonding, climate, policy, and performance. Community and society, norms, available resources, and bonding. And obviously you want to increase the influence of the positive protective factors and lower the influence of the risk factors. Some factors to consider are the adolescent's perceived risk of use, so the extent they believe the substance can cause harm. Perceived risk of marijuana by adolescents has been decreasing since 2007, and so the actual use has increased. And the legalization in other states has had a lot to do with the perceived lowered risk. But the perceived risk of tobacco has been increased. So adolescents are actually using less tobacco. Most people would agree that heroin use is a high risk for many reasons, but like the prescription medicines and pills have the illusion of being safer. They kind of come off as clean, and they're usually given to you by somebody who's trusted. As we talked about earlier, about 91% of the time they come from a doctor, friend, or family member who they trust. So education of the risks of those is kind of pretty important to get the adolescents to realize how dangerous they can be to them. And then perceived parental disapproval of youth drug use. So they say that kids who have had conversations with their parents and other trusted adults about the dangers of alcohol and other drugs are 50% less likely to use them. And that is from the National Council of Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Attitudes of peer drug use. If they believe that it's accepted or that most of their peers are using it, the risk for them to use as well goes up. Adolescence is a time of wanting to try new things. They're impulsive and take risks, which is part of the development. And so that can lead to other risk factors such as fighting and delinquent behavior. Protective factors can include religious or spiritual involvement and beliefs, especially if they feel that they are part of something. Exposure to substance use prevention messages and programs. 73% of kids aged 12 to 17 reported being exposed to prevention messages in school on any level. Sometimes that could be just signs hanging up in the hall or something. But they also report their drug use to be about 3% less than those who had no exposure. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but 3%, that's still a lot of kids nationwide. SAMHSA and NIDA are two really good sources. Teens.drugabuse.gov is through NIDA, and I see you have some of the resources from them over there as well. And those things are free if you just ask them to send them to you. Let's see. Parental involvement. Parents can increase protective factors by strong nurturing and attachment, listening and being involved, knowledge of parenting and development, using teaching moments when relating topics on TV or when things happen with celebrities, modeling social connections, parents being resilient and knowing where to ask for support. And it's suggested that when you're talking to your children about family history of drug and alcohol addiction, to kind of be matter of fact and just kind of discuss it as you would any other disease.
I was once invited to do a presentation to a parents group at a school, the Millard Learning Center, which is Millard Public Schools' alternative high school. They figured that 75% of their kids were using pain pills. They kept finding hydrocodones in the lockers, in the bathrooms, in the parking lot. And they brought a bunch of parents together and asked that I come in and talk to them about opioid dependency. And it was amazing the number of parents in that school that thought this was an adult problem, a late 20s to early 60s problem, and they were just floored that there's such a prevalence of opioid dependency in the schools. So for those of you who are in schools, if you do have parent groups and you do talk about substance abuse, as we see, and the CDC is now saying, pain meds are starting to become the gateway drug. Talk to the parents about the pain pills, not about the marijuana and the methamphetamine. Include in there a good lecture about the pain pills. Thank you.
Okay. So some protective factors for adolescents would be, so they feel connected to family, community, and school, having positive attitudes towards school and teachers, social skills, being able to tell friends no, making sure they have coping skills for stress, substance-free activities, positive future plans, having clear rules and consequences about drug use, academics, and behavior.
Initiation of drug use, okay. Every year, substance abuse treatment facilities have to report, or don't have to, they are strongly encouraged as a source of their funding and licensure and certification to report to a federal level information about their program and what ages they're starting to see people use drugs and what drugs they're doing and everything else. 2013, they estimated that 2.8 million kids aged 12 and older used an illicit drug for the first time within a year. So kids are starting at 12 years old. It's not uncommon on pain medications to see them at 10 years old, actually. Over half the kids who are starting to use drugs are under the age of 18. It's not an adult thing anymore. It used to be, back in the old days, the adults were the ones that were starting to use their drugs in their bronchitis, in their 20s, okay. But what's interesting is 1 in 5 of the kids who start using drugs start with non-medical psychotherapeutics. Psychotherapeutics are the ADHD medications, the pain medications, the mood stabilizers. Okay. 6.3 listed inhalants as their first illicit drug use. How many think they know what that inhalant is? How many think it's gasoline? How many think it's spray paint? How many think it's that dusting air that you get with your computer? Oh, thank you very much. That dusting air is the major inhalant. And what it does is that the chemical in the air is heavier than oxygen itself. The kid inhales it, it goes down and it sets in the bottom of their lungs. And the bottom of the lungs is where all those little hair guys are at that are busy capturing all the oxygen. Well, they can't. It's not uncommon to find a kid overdose on the inhalant where they still got that little red straw sticking out of their mouth and the can rolling off somewhere. So inhalant use is a big thing, especially in the school population. 6.3% of your kids are probably going to try inhaling something. 2013, about 170,000 people used heroin for the first time in the past year. Average age of heroin use, of course, is from 12 to 49. The average is 24 and a half. In the schools, I don't think we're supposed to see a 24-year-old person, but maybe in the community college level, the regular college level, you'll still see them at that age.
A lot
Again,
of those people started using the pills in high school.
yeah, a lot of them did start experimenting with the pain medications in the high school. 2013, 8.8% of youths aged 12 to 17 were involved in illicit drug abuse. That's a lot. Almost 10% of our kids are out there using drugs of some kind. Marijuana, inhalants, opioids, the synthetic stuff, bath salts, synthetic marijuana. They're doing something out there. Tie it into the adult world. They say about 20% of adults are using substances. Of that 20%, 2% are active opioid dependent people. Okay. 7% recurrent marijuana users, 2.2% non-medical users of psychotherapeutic drugs, the whole gamut. Okay. And the drug that they used kind of varied by age. But here you can see that the psychotherapeutics, that's the blue color, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, the blue one. But you can see psychotherapeutics are the number 2 drug in all age groups from 12 to 17.
12 to 13 are the first.
But it's the highest amongst the youngest of our young, the 12 to 13-year-olds. Why? Because mom and dad's medicine cabinet has opioids, or it has other medications. Or big brother might have had ADHD, I don't, but I'm going to try these things. So again, it's a big, almost considered a gateway drug by the CDC anymore. 2013, the illicit drug use rate was higher in males than females. I guess as guys are just a little more stupid, I don't know. I do know my wife tells me that from time to time. So what are we going to do about these kids and their opioid use and then their overall drug use? There's a lot of treatment options that are available out there that run from strict abstinence-based to what has started to gain more and more favor out there. It's called medication-assisted treatment. Historically, the only medication-assisted treatment that was out there that was recognized as a substance abuse thing was the use of methadone. Methadone has been used to treat adults over the age of 18, or in the state of Nebraska over the age of 19, since the late 60s. It is now growing. We are starting to see there's other medications out there for the treatment of opioid dependency. Buprenorphine. And within the past 2 years, there's been a new intramuscular injection called Vivitrol. But using any kind of medication by itself to treat substance abuse is not the answer. Right now, and especially here in Lincoln, we have a lot of buprenorphine prescribing doctors. Buprenorphine was a substance that was approved several years ago for doctors to use who realized that their patients were becoming dependent or addicted to pain pills, and the doctor wanted to work with that person to get them off. Buprenorphine is a Schedule III narcotic. Right now, it's being discussed by the DEA to become a Schedule II because of the abuse that's going on. Buprenorphine acts on different receptor sites in the brain to trick the brain into not realizing that it's having any of these dopamine and endorphin depletion problems. The problem with the buprenorphine is the doctor, first of all, has to be specifically certified by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and the Centers for Substance Abuse Treatment, SAMHSA and CSAT. It's an 8-hour course. It's worth 8 CMEs. You got a lot of doctors that don't understand addiction going out for that 8 CMEs because that really looks good because I only got to have 12 a year. And they get this thing and they start trying to treat people with buprenorphine. There's 2 types of buprenorphine that's used out there, Subutex and Suboxone. Subutex is straight buprenorphine, Suboxone is buprenorphine and naloxone. Naloxone is a medication they use in ERs when someone comes in with an opiate overdose to get the opiates out of them and make them feel kind of okay. The buprenorphine doctors are supposed to say there's a reasonable chance, or I have reasonable access to refer someone to treatment. A lot of people who go to see the buprenorphine doctors, they do so once a month, pay them whatever the fee is, get their prescription for a 90-day supply of buprenorphine. They go to Walgreens. They might take half the buprenorphine on their own and they might sell the other half to pay for their next doctor's appointment. They might go to treatment. They might not. The treatment program might do a drug screen on them. The DEA has concluded nationwide that 2/3 of the people who are involved in a buprenorphine program are not receiving treatment. Medication-assisted treatment is the medication plus a skilled counselor to work on the psychosocial aspect of the addiction. It's something that just doesn't cure itself. And as we were talking about with the dopamine and endorphins, if you don't learn how to work with it and you don't give your brain time to heal, it ain't going to work. Okay?
There are those handouts over there on the medications.
Yes, there's several handouts over there that are about medication and treatment. Okay. For the opioid dependency or the pain pills, the federal government, SAMHSA and CSAT, and the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and a lot of the big research medical facilities have all said that getting them on a methadone maintenance program is their best option. The methadone maintenance programs have a huge task of making sure that the people that we bring in and that the people we treat are following the rules of the program and not just being there to make sure they're not drug sick or just there because someone tells them to be. A big problem with medication-assisted treatment and the legal system. If you can have a kid that's involved in some kind of a medication-assisted treatment, methadone, buprenorphine, Vivitrol, the abstinence-based substance abuse treatment community says that's just trading one drug for another. Therefore, the legal systems tell you to get off this stuff or you're going to go to jail. So they force people off. The people's brains are realizing all of a sudden they no longer have the replacement dopamine and endorphin kind of stuff. What do? They relapse, they start using their pain pills, or they start going back to the heroin, so now you got another problem that was caused by someone telling you to get off of something that was working. They all talk about, the use of opioid replacement therapy or medication-assisted treatment. They liken it to a diabetic is going to have to take their diabetes medication every day. I've got a shot thyroid. If I don't take my Synthroid, I'm an interesting person by that evening, falling asleep and having no energy. So am I a drug-dependent person? Yes, if I want to have an evening. Okay. Are our pain kids who got a dependency on opiates a drug abuser? Probably. That's what got them into trouble. But if they're on a treatment program, are they a drug addict? Not if they're not doing anything else. They're using a lawful medication prescribed by a doctor in a DEA and state licensing approved and heavily monitored program to make sure that they're doing okay. Okay. The important things of getting your kids into treatment, especially for the opioid dependency, instead of shaming them and telling them to stop doing that. If they're in some kind of a treatment program, it's going to increase their chances of survival because, as I said before, you make them get off the stuff, they last a few weeks, they last a few months, they relapse, that old amygdala in the brain just kicks back in and they're right back up, pushing their tolerance even higher than what it was before. If we have people that are involved in a medication-assisted program like the buprenorphine that I was just talking to you about, there's a higher retention rate in buprenorphine programs if these doctors would just bring in a treatment component as opposed to those who come, they get their pills, they sell half of them, they take half of them, and they come back once a month. But they don't do anything except they continue this typical drug abuse lifestyle. We all know with the injectors, the heroin, the methamphetamine, the pain pills, there's always the needle sharing. HIV was kind of under control. The state of Indiana, north central Indiana, they got rid of 2 of their treatment programs. And in the past 5 years, they've seen a 49% increase in HIV because of the needle sharing that's been going on, okay? People say you open up an opioid treatment program and you're bringing all these people into your neighborhood who are drug addicts and that increases crime. Statistics have shown that the methadone maintenance programs really don't increase the amount of crime. In fact, methadone patients have such a commitment to their clinic that they pretty much police the neighborhood to keep the cops out of there themselves. The problem does get into when you get some programs, they're like 1,500 to 2,000 patients and a staff that's overwhelmed. Then you have problems in those locations. But the smaller clinics, which is what we specialize in, Lincoln has 130 people?
120.
120 people. Omaha has about 210 in our program. There's another government-funded program that has about 250. But there's no legal problems going on in the neighborhoods. The neighbors aren't complaining about anything. The cops aren't there. In fact, the cops, they were quite amazed to find out that there was a methadone clinic. After having been there for 5 years, they go, "There, what? How's this been under our nose all this time?" It was kind of a good feeling. With your opioid-dependent people, and I know it's more adults, but it's also going to be happening in your school-aged kids, pregnancy and opioid abuse are a very dangerous combination to the unborn fetus during the first and third trimesters where all the development is really taking place, because mom's doing this all day with her drug cycles and her blood levels. And little Junior, it still gets through the placental barrier, so they do have opioids in their system. Okay, it's important to have them in treatment, and especially on a maintenance treatment, so that they do this during the first and third trimesters. That way the fetus has a more stable environment in which to develop. We see a lot of places where they try to get the opioid-maintained mom off of the methadone or off of the buprenorphine or whatever. There is a higher rate of birth-related problems in those moms than there is with babies that are born to methadone-maintained or buprenorphine-maintained moms. The biggest problem they find with babies that are born to methadone moms, or bup moms as they call them, is there's a probability they're not going to have as good of eyesight as they probably would have if they did not have the opioids in their system. And after birth, yes, they do go through opioid withdrawal for about 4 hours, but their metabolism is so blasted high that the methadone or the opioids is burned out of them within 3 to 4 hours, so they say. Okay, so there's improved birth outcomes if you have them involved in medication-assisted treatment. You can see in Nebraska from 2013 or 2009 to 2013, you can see on the graph there where people were at that were involved in opioid treatment programs. Okay, so in Nebraska, since about 2010, we've had more than 500 people involved in some kind of 5 minutes, guys, it's break time. But that's just for the methadone. It's not for the buprenorphine. We have 500 people out there who are doing quite well on an opioid replacement program. you're not going to recognize them. I can tell you in Omaha, we have clergy, we have doctors, respiratory therapists, nurses, business professionals, finance and accounting, car salesmen, and you're not going to know it. We have the recreational drug addicts. You're probably going to know them, but they're not going to last in our program too long, okay? A lot of the people that are out there on methadone, you'll never know because they're functioning normal. They take their daily medication just like you would if there any other kind of medication required program, your heart pills, and they function normally. With the induction of buprenorphine in Nebraska, you can see that it really spiked up a lot higher because of the buprenorphine. All these doctors that can now treat addiction in their office. A doctor cannot legally treat an opioid-dependent person for more than 3 days in their life of dealing with that patient. If that person comes and they know that they're an opioid-dependent person, the doctor has to give you pain medication for day 1 and refer you out to a program. They can give you pain medication if you come back on day 2, as long as you're trying to follow through with the referral. They can give you pain medication for day 3. And if you haven't made it into the program by the 3rd day, the doctor under DEA law cannot prescribe you another opioid for the rest of your life for that doctor. So, patient goes to Dr. A, to Dr. B, to Dr. C, to Dr. to keep that supply coming in because they don't want to get into treatment. It was hoped that the buprenorphine being introduced to the doctors would allow that to happen. There's a bunch of buprenorphine doctors, but the treatment side of it's just not happening for the most part. But you can see there's a lot of people now that are on buprenorphine that may not be receiving the adequate levels of treatment. Thoughts, questions, comments? Don't throw anything though.
Question. So the methadone program, and how many do you...
Well, the question is how many on methadone fully recover? And how do you define recovery is the question I have to ask you. If you are looking for someone who's going to be abstinent-based and never use methadone again, that's a very small number. Opioid treatment is recognized as long-term treatment. Ideally, we want someone to be going through it for at least 2 years minimum to get the brain healed up. And then that way you can work more on the psychological side. On the average, you see people who are pretty successful in methadone programs there for at least 5 years or more. Methadone maintenance, since it's medication assisted, it is fair game under the federal rules to be on it until you're 1 foot in the grave. Unfortunately, opioid dependency has a very high 90% relapse rate over the course of 5 years. So if you look at people who have been on a program and got off of the program, and you can track them down 5 years later, I don't think anybody's ever done that number at this point in time, so I don't have a good answer beyond that. So how do you define recovery is the thing. Some of them say this is recovery, this saved my life, this is what I'm going to be doing. Any other questions? Oh. From Adderall?
Yeah.
Well, that's a psychostimulant. And so if you are not really in need of that medication, because with ADHD, the stimulants act in opposite direction. They calm a person down. If you've got a person who's not ADHD or doesn't need the medication and they're taking an Adderall, expect them to be wired. Pretty hyped up, pinging off the ceilings, hard to go to bed. Methadone can be used to treat adolescents. The federal regulations require that before the age of 18, if you have an adolescent that's seeking treatment, they have to first of all gone through 2 detox periods and been unsuccessful. If they can prove that they've been unsuccessful, they can be considered, or if they have not gone through 2 successful detoxes, their mom, dad, or legal guardian have to sign all the paperwork for them to be started on a medication-assisted treatment program. With our adolescents, if we do get any, it's our goal to try to not to keep them too long because they haven't been using as long as our adults. Our average patient is in the age range of 34 to 60.
Most of ours are 25 to 39 at our clinic.
Okay, most of Lincoln's are 25 to 39.
But we do have up to 69.
My Sioux Falls clinic, I got 2 patients. One is 87, the other's 92. They come in once. They come in once a month. They get their supply of medication and they go home and they're fine. So, but adolescents, we really don't treat adolescents at our level. We want them to fail elsewhere before they can get to us. Yes to everything. He's asking about withdrawal from methadone. Opioid withdrawal, I don't know. I'm told it's really bad. It's like having the worst case of the flu that can last for weeks and weeks and weeks. People say that withdrawing from heroin or pain pills is easier.
Or shorter anyway.
Well, that's what I mean. And what's going on is the cycle of the pain pill use is every few hours. So they feel crappy, they use, they feel crappy, they use, they feel crappy, they use. Whereas with the methadone, they start withdrawing and then they use and then they start a gradual slow withdrawal. So if you were to draw a curve of the relapse, heroin and pain pill relapses or withdrawal is like this. Methadone withdrawal is like this, so it's longer. You don't realize it, but when it really kicks in, it kicks in big time.
And ideally, they would be working with their counselor to slowly taper their dose.
We will cold turkey a person if you violate our rules for bringing in a weapon, touching anybody on our staff. We've done that with one person in Lincoln. We have a blind counselor and someone was dumb enough to touch him in a threatening manner, and I told him that he's out of the program now. Ideally, our doctor will work with the person to slowly taper them off over the 6-month time period if possible. We have a lot of people that get started and they want to be off in 2 weeks. We try to urge them against it. And before the end of 2 weeks, they're saying, I think I need to change my mind and work on this a little bit more. So the withdrawal is there. It's a horrible, crummy feeling. It takes a long time on methadone, but hopefully it's safer for the individual. Tramadol tramadol is also called Ultranol. There's an opiate agonist and an opiate antagonist. Tramadol is an opiate antagonist. It's molecularly similar to an opioid agonist, but a little bit different. And what happens when you take tramadol and Oxycontin and put them together, they cancel out the effects of each other and you have a person that's in withdrawal. If you just use tramadol alone, the pharmaceutical reps that go to the doctor and kind of wave the big eyebrows sold all the doctors on it was a non-addicting pain medication. And there are a lot of people who are addicted to tramadol just as much as they are the opioids. But it's just another pain reliever. You see some doctors take your opiate agonist in the morning, take your opiate antagonist in the evening. People do that, but it really doesn't help them because it gets a different blood level going 2 different ways, 2 different times.
All the time we have for questions, so thank you very much.